Next day we were up early and back into it. That's the beautiful thing about the Springs. There's over 1,000 acres here on Ian and Tony's property, and you can go pretty much anywhere you want on a set of tracks that are fantastic. There are touring tracks and there are tough tracks, and there are some tracks that are just way too tough. This wasn't one of them, but it wasn't looking that easy either. This granite country can be a real cruncher for a whole lot of reasons, not just diffs and, underbody things like that, but this is the place where the people with lockers like me can really get it wrong. One of the things about lockers, and Andrew and Rick and I had this conversation around the fire the night before, is that once you've fitted lockers, you can do a lot of damage to your vehicle. But as far as I'm concerned, you do a lot more damage by not having them. It's not the lockers that cause the damage, it's the people who use them. Now, in a situation like this, lockers are fine when you're on the soft stuff and there's a bit of scrabble going on. And that's why I haven't got the front locker locked in there, because there's not enough scrabbling to be done. It's all too hard, which means that with a solid surface like that solid granite back there, once you've got the lockers on, there's nowhere for give to go at all. There is no give. That's it. It is unforgiving. And that's when you break something. In fact, I've seen CVs break just with people backing up a little bit of a rock ledge and forgetting to flick the front locker off. That front locker button, if you've got one, treat it like the Holy Grail. Just use it when you know you can get away with using it, and you'll be right. All the miles Milo's done with those lockers and some of the toughest tracks in Australia, and we've done a couple of CVs in all that time. Maybe 3, I guess, but once every 3 or 4 years, I would have been busting a lot more than that without them, I reckon, because I would have been trying harder to get there. I was saying before how good 40s are for people who are starting out in four-wheel driving, and one of the reasons is because they are so good in standard form. When you look at these trucks, they both look really wild, 35-inch tyres and chop tops and doors and all the other stuff. But at the end of the day, when you carefully look at the specs, they've both still got their original 3B 4-cylinder motors. They're running 5 speeds and power steerings and disc brakes, but that's because they came with that in 1984. So the motors are original. Really, it's only things like the suspension and the tyres that the boys have really played with. I mean, they've had to do a lot of repairs and stuff along the way, and both these guys have fitted different seats because they're not really into that zero comfort factor of the old bench in a shorty scene. But you don't have to do a lot to a 40 to have it looking really tough and making an awful lot of fun. Now, this is a prime example, this little slope, of how lockers save a vehicle a lot of damage. With Milo's lockers on, bingo, straight up and out of a very tricky little creek bed. Hardly any revs. I'm not big on using revs. The less revs I can use, the better as far as I'm concerned, because it's when you've got a big build-up of revs, that's when gears break, diffs break, axles break. Keep the revs down, you don't have those sudden grabs that snap things. But you watch, when Rick comes through here, he's got bigger tyres, a shorter wheelbase. This is perfect for that situation, except for one thing, no lockers. So he can't get the traction to get up that last little bit. That means to get out of there, and he's determined to get out of there because I just did, he's got to use a lot of revs. A lot of bouncing and a lot of revs. That's the only trick, really. Now that sort of stuff, whilst a 40 will take it all day long, especially a 42, it's not good, not in the long term, because that's when you are wearing things out. So as far as I'm concerned, the lockers pay for themselves in those sort of situations because you can walk out of there nice and easily. Very little damage to the tracks, very little damage to you. Andrew told me, that one of the reasons he likes the short 40s, and I hope his missus isn't listening, is because they're real chick magnets. Good on you, mate. Can't say I've actually found that with Milo. I have hit a couple of galahs on the road, but chick magnet, I think someone hid mine. There is another little trick here for some of you much more advanced drivers, I guess. If you don't have limited slip lifts and lockers and things like that, when you get in a situation like this where you've got 1 or 2 wheels doing all the spinning, a tiny little bit of pressure on the brake pedal with your left foot or even your right foot and heel toeing the accelerator will quite often put just enough strain on the brakes to turn those other wheels the little bit they need to turn, and that's all it takes to get you out of there. Still some awfully thick mud at the springs. I guess that's why they call it the springs. It must be bubbling up from under the ground. We found a couple of monster mud holes, that's for sure. The shorties are absolutely brilliant at weaving their way through trees. That short wheelbase is wonderful for that. Of course, the big drawback's the comfort factor. There isn't any. There's more than one rocky creek bed at the springs, and they're a sheer joy all in their own, I reckon. The whole trick to negotiating any sort of a creek bed is to physically remember exactly where your diff centres are. And from then on, it's all a question of looking at the landscape and thinking high spots. You want to avoid the high spots where your diffs are, and you want to gain the high spots where your tyres are. Don't always follow the car in front. Sometimes that can be the best thing, and if the driver in front's very experienced and the vehicle's very similar, then it probably is the best thing. But I've always found that you should look at everything with a fresh perspective. Think about it from your point of view, what your vehicle looks like underneath, and with your past knowledge of what your vehicle can do, and then just go for it. Not too many revs. Go as far as you can, go backwards, have another crack if you're not making it on that first attempt. Oops, there you go, see? You can talk about it all day long and still get it wrong, John. That's all right. Plenty of warning for Rick. He knew what was coming up on this section, didn't he? Plus he's got a few extra inches of tyres and suspension there. I've often thought about fitting the bigger tyres to Milo, but at the end of the day I just do way too much touring, and troopies tend to be a little bit top heavy anyway, even with a metre missing out of the back. Andrew built that front bar himself, which is one of the beaut things about 40s, because you can hop in and do things like that, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to look great. As long as you built it with lots of overkill and lots more metal than you really needed, then it's going to look like a 40, isn't it? It's not like we're going for tight little angles and beautiful curves here, is it? Yep, 40s are just great trucks to work on, and one of the best things about them is you don't have to work on them that often, really, because basically, even though most of these things are at least 20 years old now or more, 25 years old actually is the newest truck here, you're talking something that was very, very reliable in the past and so simple that it's always easy to do some sort of a quick patch up on it. Here we are, right up on top of Bald Knob, one of the highest hills on the Springs, and from here, on a good day, you can see Warwick quite easily. You can almost see Toowoomba in the distance. It's an amazing place to be, it really is. And just the sort of place to go and reminisce on a big day's four-wheel driving. Oh dear, but all good things have to come to an end. Ian's got a pump, a compressor down at the Springs HQ, right in front of the coffee shop. And I've got to tell you something about the Stables coffee shop, which is the front veranda you can see right there. They serve one of the best all-day breakfasts you've ever had in your life. So after you've had a look at my cooking and put the lid back on, duck over here for a real feed and some nice coffee. Ian and Tony will sure make you feel at home. It's a great place. You know what? I was back there 3 weeks later with the family for a bit of a camping trip. But not in Milo this time, no. In one of those horrible late model 80 series things. Never mind. Very comfortable, especially for the family.